I got to say this. This is like a fascinating social experiment, right? And I do wonder when we're going to get to the part where people just kind of admit it, right? That apple trees do make apples. And when you start with the idea and the admittance that Deion Sanders is arguably, or maybe inarguably, the greatest cover corner in the history of the sport. Are we okay saying that? Byron, do you have any problem? Like, we're not football guys, but if I said, hey, there's never been a greater cover corner in the history of the sport than Deion Sanders, would I sound like an idiot for saying that?
No.
Okay. So he's a great player. He's a gigantic personality. And he's done a very good job turning around Colorado's football program after building up Jackson State's football program. Okay? These two things can be true. Okay? You can be an all-time great player. You can be a really good force of nature head coach. And you can be a colossal pain in the ass as a parent to a potential draftee. Okay? In the apple trees make apples, can we just be honest that, and psychologists love this because what I'm going to say is true. You're not only part of their gene pool, there's a nurture, not just a nature, to how you've been raised. Right? Most of my friends, okay, we all kind of grew up the same, lower middle class, whatever. I can't remember going out to eat as a kid. But if we did, we went to like Shakey's Pizza. We went to, you go out with a team after a game, and they throw up the game on one of those projection big screens. You guys remember those? They had like 3 color lights for them, and you play football. I played, it was junior All-American football for the orange teams, and we go to Shakey's Pizza, and there's one of those big screen TVs. It wasn't really clear, but you'd watch the football game. All the kids would get a bunch of quarters. You'd play in the arcade, and then you'd have a bunch of pizza. Right? That was the extent of going out to dinner. But some people are raised where they went out to dinner as kids, and so their expectations of eating out is different. I think one of the reasons that, maybe Dan, you experience this when you have a kid and you always clean off their plate, right? As Brody's aged and you start to go out and you're like, you put on that extra weight because you're eating because we were raised where you cleaned off your plate. And if you didn't, at least in my household, if you didn't clean your plate when you ate dinner, you had it for breakfast. That's a legit thing. I don't know if I've ever told you guys this. When I was a kid, not so shocking, I would talk too much at the dinner table. I'd talk too much. So my mom put one of those, those kitchen timers where you'd spin it and it actually makes the ticking stuff? Okay. My mom would put a timer, something like that, next to me, and if the buzzer went off while there was still food on my plate, I had to eat it for breakfast. I don't know when the last time you guys have eaten with me, but I eat crazy fast now. Like crazy fast. People are like, oh my God, I didn't even get through like the first part of my entree and you're done. I'm like, yeah, that's because my parents were like, you talk too much, eat your food, or you're going to eat it for breakfast. Right? Who we are is a product of our genes, but also how we were raised. I kind of think that's inarguable. So if we're going to sit here and we're going to act like Shedeur Sanders, we should only judge him based upon his success at quarterback and not hold Deion as part of the guide for what he's going to be like or how he's going to be the coach, I think we're just denying reality. He is a chip off the old block. He carries the arrogance of a Deion Sanders. He carries the money, the financial backing of a Deion Sanders. He's only been coached in college by Deion Sanders. And Deion has never held him accountable. So if you think that we're being unfair to Shedeur Sanders, I think the easiest parallel is Josh Rosen, right? Josh Rosen, his last regular season football game was against USC at the Coliseum. And if you watch Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold play, you'd be like, one guy looks like a first-round pick, the other guy looks like a guy who's just running around for his dear life. And the guy running around was Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold is still in the league. Granted, failed in his first couple stops, but had a great year last year, and now is going to be the starter for your Seahawks, Dan. Whereas Josh Rosen, long gone, never to be heard from before. And when Josh Rosen was getting drafted in the NFL draft, people in the NFL were like, hey, you know, both of his parents are college educated, and I think his mom's a doctor. And the fear was, one, Josh doesn't love football, and if there's any sort of head injury, Josh Rosen's not going to play because he doesn't need it. He comes from affluence. His parents are well educated. He doesn't need the NFL. And then the last part was Josh's personality was one where, remember, he had the hot tub in his dorm room when he was at UCLA? And I had a GM tell me that there wasn't one guy who was like, you know who we love? I love Josh Rosen. Right? That's what the position is. And so when you factor in that Shedeur's been raised with a silver spoon in his hand, Shedeur has been treated with kid gloves when he's at Colorado. Shedeur's driven a Lamborghini. Shedeur has his own logo. Shedeur has his legendary room at his house for being drafted. Shedeur's dad is Deion Sanders. He carries himself with an arrogance of a Deion Sanders. He's not the greatest cover corner ever. His dad is. It paints a picture which is an accurate tale of what NFL teams can expect. And then you factor in that there's questions about him holding the ball, taking sacks. And did he take sacks to protect his completion percentage? Right? That's the whole thing. Like, people don't question whether or not he can find receivers and get rid of it. But why did he hold on to the football? Because he completed 70% of his passes, and he wanted to hold on to that number. And when you take a sack, that doesn't go down against you. That goes down against your offensive line. Again, getting away from accountability. I think all these are an accurate picture, and we're making about things that it's not about. It's about Shedeur. It's about who he is. It's about what it would be like to coach him and how hard it would be, and that's why he wasn't drafted last night. Go ahead, Dan. I can see you itching to get in.
I was waiting. I don't even think we need to go to any other quarterback. I think we need to look at this draft. If Deion was the enormous problem, or if race was the problem, or if there was something else, why did Travis Hunter go number 2? Because by all accounts, Travis Hunter and Deion Sanders had a father-son-like relationship. Heck, it seems that Shedeur and Travis are BFFs. They're best of friends. There's everything with it. Travis Hunter's draft stock was not hurt. He went second overall. Probably would have gone first overall if the NFL wasn't obsessed with the quarterback position, forcing the Titans to take Cam Ward at number 1. Otherwise, Travis Hunter's probably the first overall pick in the draft. Yet the Jaguars said, we'll sacrifice our future because we want Travis Hunter so bad. And we're also, Doug, talking about, again, a league that loves the quarterback position, and you cannot survive without a quarterback in the NFL, yet teams aren't taking a flyer or even a chance. I think that tells you everything you need to know about Shedeur Sanders and how he's thought about throughout the league.
I got a tweet here from a Jess Scott. By the way, you can tweet the show at Gottlieb Show. Love the show, but it is about race. I'll turn your show back on next week. Okay, here's my question. And it's always been my question. It goes back to the Eric Bieniemy. Should Eric Bieniemy be hired? Is the league racist because they won't hire Eric Bieniemy? Okay, this is Ryan Clark of ESPN bringing race into the equation.
My biggest problem with it is obviously the anonymity of all of the comments and all of the quotes and all of the things that we have had reported, whether it was Josina Anderson around the combine, recently with this quote from an offensive coach who says he's entitled, who says he puts the blame. I watched Shedeur Sanders get damn near killed for 2 years at Colorado. And I never saw him berate a lineman on the sideline. I never saw him cuss or scream at a coach. And you're hearing these things like entitled and these little pieces of the characteristics of his personality when we had a number 1 overall draft pick get arrested for being orderly and drunk. And we had more people coming out and saying, okay, here is who the real Baker Mayfield is. Don't watch this video. Don't believe that what you saw of him is who he is. He's a good person. He's a good leader. He's this. We had more anonymous people saying those things. Shedeur Sanders never been arrested. Shedeur Sanders has never been in trouble. Shedeur Sanders has never misused his names to the point of taking advantage of people. You have Johnny Manziel, who missed the first game of his last year against Rice for Texas A&M because he was suspended. You have Johnny Manziel, who ended up getting a whole documentary about how effed up he was away from the field, but there was no anonymous talk about him. There was no one coming out and saying Johnny Manziel isn't a good person. Johnny Manziel is entitled. Johnny Manziel has an alcohol issue. And so to me, the way that Shedeur Sanders has been covered seems purposeful.
Yeah, so Ryan Clark's doing what Ryan Clark does. He's making it about race because he only mentioned white quarterbacks who he feels like got a pass. By the way, Johnny Manziel flamed out of the NFL. Right? Like, you're using a guy who maybe they didn't do enough background research. And, oh, yeah, by the way, if we go back, Johnny Manziel was falling in that draft, only to have the Cleveland Browns jump up and draft him in surprising fashion because the owner wanted him. Do you know who the actual GM wanted to draft? Do you remember that draft, Dan Byer? Who, the Cleveland Browns hired an analytics company, and they had him do all the numbers on who they should draft. It was Teddy Bridgewater, right? Teddy Bridgewater was supposed to be the guy, right? And when Teddy Bridgewater was the guy, then the owner walked in, and the story goes that a homeless person stopped him on the way into the draft room and was like, you should draft Johnny Manziel. He'll fill up the stadium. And that's why they drafted Johnny Manziel. Right? I didn't hear him bring up Jamarcus Russell. There wasn't background on Jamarcus Russell's background or getting hooked on scissor-up, that it's called purple drink. Right, which led to him being out of the NFL. None of that. We've had flame-out quarterbacks that are black, flame-out quarterbacks that are white. We've had good quarterbacks that are black. We have good quarterbacks that are white. Hey, do you remember when Geno Smith was getting ready to be drafted and what happened then? Anybody remember this?
2013.
2013, there's a guy named Nolan Noraki. Okay? And Nolan Noraki, all he does is sit down and he did these big draft write-ups, right? Big draft write-ups. And he went through, and his write-up on Geno Smith was simply based upon he's not that athletic, not that accurate. There's these things that he doesn't do, his personality, whatever. And no one has ever said, hey, Nolan, you nailed it. No one. Nolan Noraki was roasted over the coals because he put his name on a scouting report that, by his sources inside West Virginia's program and by all scouts, was accurate. Geno fell to the second round, ended up starting with the Jets, and flamed out early, and only 10 years later has resurrected his career as he's learned from his mistakes and he's matured into a likable dude that's made an incredible career in the NFL. The idea that somehow there's a racial bias to this is so far from reality. Again, it's the same thing I said about Eric Bieniemy. NFL teams are about one thing. They have one agenda. There's only one thing that matters, and that's if you win football games. If you win football games. Both the starting quarterbacks in this year's game were black men. Okay? No one's carrying this like, oh my God, we got to hold him to a different standard. You're doing the whataboutisms. We're doing the whataboutisms. Ryan Clark curiously omits the fact that there were several times he threw his offensive line under the bus in press conferences over the past 2 years. Ryan Clark curiously omits the fact that he didn't play late in the Nebraska game because he was taking a beating. One reason he's taking a beating is he won't get rid of the damn ball. And he won't get rid of the ball because he selfishly wanted to protect the fact that he was leading the country in completion percentage. Like, can you prove racial bias when the number one overall pick was a quarterback and he's black? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I think the biggest issue with people who claim racism is they do so without any sort of proof other than arbitrary arguments, which aren't. Like, Baker Mayfield was discussed a ton. And, oh, yeah, by the way, I think Baker Mayfield was held to an incredibly high standard being the number one overall pick and was ushered out of town for Deshaun Watson. Right? Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson, who had, was it 40 people who charged him with sexual assault, right?
Accused, yeah.
Accused him of sexual assault, like 40 people. And by the way, Deshaun Watson's black. Nobody cared in Cleveland. You know why? Because they thought Deshaun Watson could win them football games. Can your production outweigh your problems? That's what everybody, like we say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Right? And what 32 teams said last night was, not as a first-round pick. So Ryan Clark's job is to analyze. Show us on tape why. Show us based upon your sources. But the idea that anonymous sources, like, dude, Nolan Noraki, have you seen him on any have you seen him on any of these broadcasts? Matt Miller's now working at ESPN. And by the way, Matt Miller got his start working on my show 20 years ago. He was a young guy in Joplin, Missouri, just grinding, and he finally made it. But Matt Miller never put his name on anything negative towards a quarterback, so this didn't happen to him. Because that's what happens when you put your name on it, regardless of whether or not it's accurate or inaccurate. Right? If you want to tell me that Shedeur Sanders doesn't act or carry himself in a way in which is entitled, then you're going to have to show me some proof. Just like you're going to have to show me some proof that there's somehow race comes into this. Half of the star quarterbacks in the NFL are black men. Right? It's such a dated argument. If it was 50 years ago, you'd have a good argument. If it was 40 years ago, maybe you'd have an argument. 30 years ago, I don't know. But we're making it about what it's not about. Right? It's about the whole package. Can you stand in front of 52 other dudes on a Sunday and get them to play for you? Get them to play for you. And, oh, yeah, by the way, how many jobs are really out there available? Right? Remember, some of this is Deion and Shedeur doing it to themselves. They didn't want to play in Cleveland. Okay. You don't want to play in Cleveland? Fine. We'll move on down the road. Not a problem. Right? What you're doing is you're limiting the number of teams that can draft you. Right? Seattle doesn't need one. San Francisco doesn't need one. Rams don't need one. Chargers don't need one. Right? Just kind of keep going through. Raiders just signed Geno Smith. They don't need a first-round draft pick quarterback. They might not need a second. Right? Commanders don't need one. Giants need one, but the Giants signed 2 veterans. Right? They signed Jameis Winston, who, oh yeah, by the way, like again, if we're holding black quarterbacks to a higher standard than white quarterbacks, then why did Jameis Winston go number 1 overall? Jameis Winston had a sexual assault case that was dropped against him, wasn't he? We're not holding a guy to a higher standard. It's such a bullcrap argument, and everybody's just tired of it. Stop going with the argument. If you want to make the argument that his dad is too big or coaches are scared of having his son as quarterback because maybe he wants to take his job, all right. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe that's the case with the Giants. I'm not sure. But going to the race argument is just tired. It lacks validity. And doing the whataboutism is one of the biggest turnoffs in the media. One of the biggest turnoffs.